All right, all right, all right, all right. It's me, Robert Phoenix. Excuse me, as I down my second to last bite of a protein bar and have a little sip of Zevia. Thank you. Welcome to Sunday night AstroLive. You don't just notice this is like one of those vector art things. I don't like using the vector art things. Let me change my background. I don't have a lot of backgrounds here tonight. Should I go with the goofy? Should I go with the goofy background? Or should I go with the cool background? What about that? It's kind of a nice background, right? Miss Peaches, do you like it? It's kind of non-denominational. Miss Peaches likes the background. She does. And Peaches is very happy to see me, as I am happy to see you, or at least the approximation of seeing you, even though I don't see you. You see me. We don't see each other together, but we can conceptualize that, and hopefully to do so without losing our minds. That would be a good thing. Anyway, thank you for being patient, and we're here for another edition of Sunday Night Astro Live on the eve of the Great Eclipse. And I was in Austin. Actually, I was in Dripping Springs this weekend, and I gave a talk at this event called the Solar Eclipse of the Heart, which was in Dripping Springs, and it was put together by some very nice folks, Shannon and Russell, who I'm not sure where they are with the Austin Astrological Society anymore, but that's how I got to know them. Shannon is also a patient of Joan's. She goes to see Joan at her practice in Austin, so there's another connection there. And it was on this really beautiful piece of land in Dripping Springs, and they had this kind of a wonderful kind of centralized building there, where they were able to put some chairs together and host talks. And they had kind of an upper room where they had people that were doing readings, and they had a camp out situation, one of a number of hosted events here in the Hill Country for the eclipse. And so I gave, we were all giving 20-minute talks, because they wanted to sort of base them on these TED Talk styles of presentations. And I think they also wanted to make sure that they had the time down so that they could cut YouTube videos without doing a lot of editing. So I think that 20-minute window for presentation was kind of ideal for both of those things. So what I'm going to do tonight is, I feel like I'm kind of talked out over this eclipse, but it also feels very obligatory in some ways to talk about it before we actually experience it. So I think here's the game plan for tonight. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go kind of back into my presentation for the eclipse and what I did yesterday, and some of which, if you've been following this channel, and you have been a part of the 11th house group where we meet, and I did a 3-hour presentation on the eclipse. Some of the material you'll be familiar with. So for some of you who are just dropping by for the first time, maybe you saw the graphic, you're like, oh, here's some eclipse stuff. Let me check it out. Some of this might be new to you. in which case that'll be great. And there's always something new, right? There's always something. So I'm going to go through my presentation from the event, and so we'll do that. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to kind of go through the news and just see where we are event wise on the eve of the eclipse, because apparently we almost had another barge accident in New York City with the Verrazano Straits, which is really troubling. And I know that we talk a lot about the sun with the eclipse, but again, theoretically, the moon is also playing a role here as well. And when we get into the moon, we get into the ocean. We also get into hysteria, mania, things that seem to be beyond our control. With the sun, we feel like things are within the locus of our control. Right? Things are delineated, they're clear. There's light, there's shadow. There's the ability to make clearly delineated choices. With the moon, not so much, right? With the moon, especially during a new moon, and it doesn't even matter whether it's an eclipse moon, but with a new moon, we live in a very dark world. Now, the sky light is, or the light of the sky is illuminated more because of that presence of the new moon. So there is more celestial light, there's more starlight, but the moon itself is dark. So it's a very interesting time. And of course, a very different sort of reality when the moon is full and there is a clearly a higher degree of mania with a full moon. As she sneaks another bite of the protein bar in. So we're going to do that. I'm going to go over the presentation and give you guys what I think is up. We'll go through some news items. We'll check in. We'll see what's popping. And then we'll have a portion of the show that I'm going to open up so that you can, if you so feel like it, jump in and talk about whatever your feelings are around the eclipse, whatever ideas you have around the eclipse, whatever predictions you might have around the eclipse. Because honestly, I'm kind of talked out over the eclipse. And it's showtime, right? It's showtime. So you get to talk about it a little bit. And we'll see where we go from there. Anyway, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Jasper, is it your turn now? Come on. King Puker is here. Hi, King Puker. Hello, King Puker. So we had an earthquake in, well, people said it was New Jersey, but originally I had read that the earthquake or the source of the quake was in Lebanon, New York. Is that right? Is there a Lebanon? There's a Lebanon, Indiana, too. There's a lot of Lebanons in the United States. I thought, oh, here we go. Another biblical reference. So one of the things that I did is I drove home and I was taking some video of the hill country prior to the eclipse. And I went through Dripping Springs. I saw a really weird thing in Dripping Springs. I saw this woman with a blue umbrella walking around. Like, why the fuck would she be walking around with a blue? First of all, it's not raining. There's no threat of rain. Is she concerned about the cosmic radiation raining down upon her? So she's going to have an umbrella. Okay, fine. But why a blue umbrella? Like, I was like, this is kind of weird. That's like, it's like one of those Donnie Darko moments, right? You're like, oh, the woman with the blue umbrella. Is that a sign? Are we going to get dude up here in the hill country? I don't know. It was really weird. It was very weird. So then eventually I made it to this, and I took some video, and I took a picture of this place. It is this garden. They call it a garden. It's a sculpture garden, and it is I believe it's called the King of the Cross or something like that. Sculpture garden, and it's this kind of giant wrought iron cross um, as you're headed into town in Kerrville. So I thought to myself, well, why don't I just drive in there and cruise around and take a little video? So I did that because there's this graphic where, let me see if I have it on my computer here. Here, let me do this. I'll show you the graphic because I know it's online. And they have the exact same graphic at this place. I'll show you. And so somebody sent it to me. Who was it? Somebody. I apologize. It was sent to me on Twitter, and that's where it got my attention. So let me pull this up here. So this is what I'm talking about. This is the eclipse from October, right? And then this is the Coming King Foundation. So these are the people that put this up. They're the ones that run this park, this Coming King Foundation. And what's interesting is the image that they have of Jesus does sort of mirror or reflect this idea of Christ the King, right? Or Christ is King. Because they have these sculptures there, and that's why they call it a sculpture garden, because they have these sculptures where it's sort of like Jesus is King Arthur, and he has a crown, and he comes on a horse, and he's got a sword, and he's out of bubble gum, and he's here to kick some ass. Right. So let's just go through this. Eclipses converge at Texas Cross. Did God mark the spot? Eclipses converge at Texas Cross. A small group of Kerrville, Texas Christians living about 60 miles northwest of the Alamo in San Antonio claim God himself has marked their 777 massive modern art cross sculpture with the two coming solar eclipses. The annular ring of fire will cross over their Kerrville cross on October 14th, 2023. Then 6 months later, a total eclipse will track right over the metal cross again on April 8th, 2024, which is true. They are not fudging on the truth there. The next solar eclipse won't happen in the USA until 2045. On average, a total solar eclipse will be seen from one location every 375 years. Kerrville has the longest duration time of any place on the planet with both eclipses. The annual eclipse will be 4 minutes and 56 seconds long. The total eclipse will be 4 minutes and 25 seconds long of total darkness. The conservative Christians believe God is warning America with these two rare celestial signs that the deity wants the world that the deity wants the world to repent and focus on the cross of Jesus Christ. Critics beg to differ. They say the deity has nothing to do with the eclipse intersection right over the empty cross. TM, they trademarked the empty cross, by the way. Good job. However, the skeptics cannot dispute the fact that the two eclipses converge over Kerrville, Texas, and historically unique contemporary cross sculpture, which rises above the rural, predominantly Christian community. The hollow religious symbol cannot be missed by tens of millions of travelers on IH-10. The sculpture stands on one of the most prominent hills in the Texas Hill Country, 1/4 mile from the highway. The picturesque retirement community has been a favorite of the wealthy for over 100 years because of its beauty, climate, and hunting opportunities. Known for its rolling hills, cypress tree lined, crystal clear Guadalupe River, and abundant wildlife, the hill country town is also the birthplace of three large companies: Mooney Aircraft, James Avery Craftsman, and the HEB food chain. However, it is now recognized worldwide for its multi-million-dollar religious art garden. In June of 2022, TripAdvisor, the premier tourism website, designated the Serene Sculpture Garden as being in the top 10 of all tourist attractions worldwide. Annually, well over 100,000 visitors travel to the free art park. They come from all 50 states and about 100 countries. Garden tourist Vilma Ladrón de Guevara from Barranquilla, Colombia, said this is the most beautiful place in the United States of America. Every country should have a place like this. It is peaceful here. This is the only country in the world that has a garden like this. God deserves this and more because he is the best. The unusual open cross sculpture is also recognized as fine art across the world because of its unique geometric shape and size. The religious icon was designed and donated by internationally collected artist Max Greiner Jr., 71, and his wife Sherry, along with their Christian-owned art foundry, Eagle Bronze, in Lander, Wyoming. The sculptor has an architectural design degree from Texas A&M University. Indeed, to the consternation of atheists, the empty cross TM and the Christ-honoring art park are on the center line of both solar eclipses. The reddish, blood-colored Corten steel sculpture and garden also happen to be located at the same latitude as Israel. A 24.5-acre garden even looks like the Holy Land, with its limestone-covered hills and vegetation. The biblical art park is known as the Coming King Sculpture Prayer Garden, named after the Bible verse Revelation 19:11, which describes Jesus Christ as an avenging warrior returning in the sky on a white horse at the end of time. This type of last days tabernacle, Isaiah 2.2, is located approximately halfway between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans on the interstate highway. Believers claim this is no coincidence, while critics scoff. So what they're saying here is that this is the exact midpoint between the Atlantic and the Pacific. I think, honestly, to be fair, it depends on where you draw the midpoint. I'm not a skeptic, but I'm just being fair here. Because if you went from, say, San Diego, which would be the lowest part of California, where would that be? It's kind of on the parallel of Kerrville, now that I think about it. I mean, I think there are other midpoints, but this is a midpoint. Not a skeptic, but I am a questioner. Kerrville officials are now preparing for a human flood, possibly 150,000 eclipse tourists into the town of about 24,000 residents. Many of those visitors will be streaming to the art park on a 1,930-foot hilltop located above the city and interstate highway, which runs from Florida to California. The spiritual garden welcomed approximately 10,803 guests in May of 2023. NASA has selected Kerrville, Texas, as the premier viewing location in the USA for both eclipses. NASA will be live streaming video of the two celestial events to the world for more documentation. Okay, let's get more into NASA stuff. So for years, angry opponents publicly attacked the unfettered artist, the proposed contemporary cross in the Garden Project, in the media and at City Hall. It's like, who cares? Let him make a cross. The ancient Jewish scriptures record that the heavens declare God's majesty. Psalm 19:1. That's Old Testament, isn't it? Dozens of Bible verses state clearly that God makes himself known through the cosmos. Sounds a lot like astrology to me. And his creation. Is there something the Ancient of Days wants to communicate to humanity at this particular time in world history with the two American eclipses? Griner thinks God has a message for all earthlings. The eyes of the world are being focused right now in Kerrville, Texas for a reason. God does nothing by accident. At the precise intersection of these two rare solar eclipses stands a majestic, silent 7-story cross and a 300-foot cross-shaped garden filled with Christ-honoring sculptures and 77 Bible verses written in stone in 3 languages. The enormous cross symbolizes the way, the truth, and the life, the light, the door, the mighty fortress, the strong tower, and the resurrection, life of Jesus Christ, the Messiah of the Jews. Having betrayed our founding fathers, this nation has rejected the God of the Bible and is now rampant in rebellious sin. The God of the universe has been pointing to Debbie Mazzaros. Been pointing the universe, God of the universe has been pointing people to this holy mountain, this type of last days tabernacle, ever since the cross was erected in July 2010. Since the cross went up, God has done many signs and wonders as signposts. He desires that all people have a personal encounter with him. Okay. So this is it's kind of an interesting thing, right? It's pretty darn interesting here. Now, the other eclipse has another intersection, which I believe is in St. Louis, right at the archway of St. Louis, which marks the beginning of the West. So it's not the same midpoint, but it does represent a different midpoint. I think it's right about there, right from here to here. So I have some thoughts about this. And I went up there today, and they have this clearly posted on the way in. And, it's starting, the place is kind of starting to hum. You can tell. Now, down the road, we also have the Stonehenge of the hill country, which is kind of interesting, right? Because if you were a pagan, I mean, theoretically, you could make the same claim. Here, let me show you the Stonehenge of the hill country. Right here. And I drove by there today, and they were completely sold out. Like there's no place to park. If you're going to be there, you have to have a ticket already, right? So there you go. You've got this megalithic structure at the other end of town. And I guarantee you that since I was here, that the eclipse in October went over Stonehenge. And the eclipse tomorrow we'll go over Stonehenge. So, I mean, I think it's fascinating that sort of the pillars in many ways of these two belief systems, one which is a monotheistic uh, system, theoretically, right? And then you have this, and again, there aren't any practicing pagans, although we did do a ritual here a couple of years ago in an October event where we did an anti-mass ritual, which I'm quite proud of. And according to my guy Masaki, it changed the timeline. So, but it's not like there are a bunch of pagans that show up here and do stuff. Like they don't do that. It looks like I'm frozen. You know what this feels like? It feels like Tommy John surgery. You know, Tommy John surgery is when you blow out your elbow and then they take a tendon from another part of your body and then they attach it to your elbow and your elbow becomes stronger. And in some ways, they almost force kids to have a Tommy John. Oh, did you have a Tommy John yet? No, not yet. Oh, okay. It almost feels like these frozen moments are like my Tommy John surgery. Let me do this. Let me do our annual Google Chrome not responding moments. And I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. And we'll get into the Stonehenge of the Hill Country. Be right back. All right, we're back again. Thanks for your patience. Appreciate that. So let me go back to the old Stonehenge there, and hopefully Google will. Apparently, Google's got an event here. 40,000 people at the Google event. So yeah, we could take that same cross and put it right over this this little megalithic structure. Look at that. How beautiful that is. And of course, we have one of those Easter Island heads that's also there. So you get it all. You got an earthbound. I don't think there's a labyrinth, although you could turn the Stonehenge into a bit of a labyrinth, which is what we did. So anyway, I think this is interesting and really ironic. Now, I have some thoughts about, first of all, and I've said this before, and I apologize to anybody who is really tied to this particular belief system, and I apologize in advance. And if what I'm about to say is heretical, but I am not a huge fan of the Old Testament, and they're very different organizing principles. They're very different organizing principles, and I think that we have done a disservice to people in general by labeling it Judeo-Christian. I think it's either one or the other. It's either Judeo or it's Christian, because clearly there's a demarcation in both of those books. And while one group may agree with another part of the group on a particular part of that book, i.e., the First Testament, the other group will not agree with the other group. And that part of the book, which would be the New Testament. So I don't know. I've always felt that it was not fair to Christianity to have to yoke it to the both to both interpretations and in both cosmologies, and they're kind of different cosmologies. And when you see, and this is my experience being here in Texas, where people are very strong born again Christians, and I don't despair them of their faith. Quite the contrary, I honor their faith. If you have something you believe in, I honor what you believe in, right? For the most part, if there are things that I disagree with, then but that's your right. Right? Everybody has a right to worship and pray, meditate, venerate, however you want. Who am I to tell you to not do it that way? That said, I may not agree with certain things, and then that's on me, right? And if I feel vocal enough, or I feel um, what's the word I'm looking for? If I feel inflamed or strident enough, I'll address it. So they said that our founding fathers created this country, and now because we have trafficked in wanton sin, that we are rapidly headed towards a time of tribulation and revelation, which is what most people at that sculpture garden would say. And they would also, and this is the important part, is that they would also tie it to Israel and everything that they believe and hold valid, sacred, and true about their cross on the hill, in the belief of what they do in their life on a daily basis, is also connected to that same place that place that's at the same parallel on the other side of the world. And quite frankly, I think they're two very different places. They're two very, very different places. And this is just me, but uh, I don't think that um, God is all that concerned about real estate, right? I think that the only real estate God is concerned about is what's inside of you. That's it. That's it. And there may be this incredible investment that the Christian right has in this version of their scripture and their tabernacle that is connected to that part of the world, and how certain things must occur for the return of their Savior. That, of course, being Israel as a one state solution, and to have the temple. The temple must be rebuilt. This is an important part of the belief system. And I don't believe that God really cares about real estate all that much. What God cares about is what's in your heart, and what you do, and how you treat people, and how you comport yourself, and how you are an ambassador for the Most High, or the divine. Like, are you an ambassador for how you want to live, or how this level of truth and love wants to live through you? And we all fall short. Like, I fall short a lot of times, but that's always in the back of my brain. It's always in the back of my brain. Like, okay, who are you now? What are you doing now? And are you being the best um, ambassador of faith in your own way? That thought never strays very far from my brain. I can be very irreverent. I swear a lot, right? I have some very earthly uh, things that I like, right? But that's always in the back of my brain. And it has nothing to do with what has taken place in a country that is thousands of miles away, that have absolutely no connection or correlation to whatsoever. And so that's me. But Christians, and specifically Christians that are looking for signs and things that add up, that give them their sort of uh, cosmic playbook, that's exactly what they're looking for. And what's interesting, and again, I'm not sure how far I want to go with this, but what's interesting is that uh, they're pointing the finger in that description back at us. Like, we're the ones that have strayed. We're the ones that have sinned. We're the ones that have been given this great gift of this land of milk and honey, and we have shit all over it. And I would say that there is some truth to that, by the way. I'm not going to deny that what happens is that people take things for granted. And it's only when you realize that the thing that you have taken for granted is about to be taken from you, that's when you get pretty upset, right? And everybody's gone through that relationship where you've kind of taken that person for granted a little bit. Maybe not horribly abusive, but you've kind of taken them for granted a little bit. And all those little moments have added up and added up and added up and added up and added up. And then finally they're like, I've had enough. I'm taking my show on the road. And you're like, what do you mean? No, no. What do you mean? What's going on? Well, you've taken this for granted. And then what happens? That person will go, oh my God, I'm going to lose this relationship. And so what do they try to do? Well, I'll make it up to you. I'm sorry. You mean too much to me, and it all depends on that point, how that other person's feeling. Maybe they're like, okay, I'll give you a shot. I'll give you a chance because I care about you. I do love you, but I am not going to play second fiddle to XYZ, whatever. And then maybe you have a chance of redemption. You understand what you almost lost. And some people have done that. And that's, there's nothing wrong with being face to face with losing something that's really important to you. It could even be a job. Somebody sits you down and say, hey, look, man, you're really fucking up here. You're showing up late. Your work has been sloppy. And, if you want to be somewhere else, let me know. Because you can be replaced. And it's at that moment, oh shit, man. I've been taking this job for granted. I thought I could just show up. But like, it happens. That said, there are also agencies within our system that have led us astray, and we've allowed to be led astray. Right? It's not just we're all fallen sinners and we've fallen off the path. And and I think ultimately we have to have that level of responsibility for our lives, regardless of whether we have to report to God, our boss, our significant other, our wives, or ourselves. We have to have that level of accountability. That said, there are forces in our society, in our culture, that have socially engineered the vulnerability of the human condition, and I believe that a loving God would understand that. Right? That's what I would believe. That a loving God would say, you know what? Yeah, it's your fault, but it's not all your fault. It's not all your fault. There are some bad actors in this play. there's some real bad actors in this play. And in order for people to have a chance at redemption and love, at some point, the bad actors need to be exposed. And I feel like that's what's happening now. We talk about this time of revelation, and there's a biblical version of revelation. I understand it. I know it. And there's also, I wouldn't call it an ecumenical version, but I would call it a variation of revelation because of what's happening now in what we've been seeing. Like, you go back to 2016 and you can't unsee what you've seen since 2016 when Trump made his way into office, right? What happened? We saw just mounds and mounds of corruption, abuse of power, abuse of office, and it hasn't let up. It has not let up, even though Donald Trump has not been in office for going on 4 years now. It'll be 4 years in November since this whole thing went down with the last election. And yet it is ongoing. The rhetoric, the noise, the TDS, right? I mean, it's still going on. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're just going to use this as a plank to further destroy people and to destroy the trust and the faith and the confidence in the country, faith and trust and confidence in one another, right? I don't think we've ever lived in a time where people are more fearful, more cynical, and more distrustful than the period we're in now. And all of that has been cultivated. It's all been cultivated, right? That has nothing to do with people who have fallen away from God. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that there are these venal forces of corruption that have been at the core of what we've been experiencing for a long time, and they've gotten worse. And we have social media and we have the internet, so we're having more inroads into understanding how this is affecting us and has affected us. Call it the deep state, call it the globalists, right? Call it whatever you want. Social engineers, Zionists, neocons, Jews, Illuminati, Freemasons, call it whatever you want, right? It has been a destructive force. All of it. It's all been a destructive force. So let me give you an example. And this is a very Piscean example. So keeping astrology. Years ago, it was determined that fishermen in the New England area, we're talking Massachusetts, New Hampshire, mostly Massachusetts, maybe a little bit of Rhode Island, guys that have made their livelihood from fishing. Not just them, but their fathers, right? Uncles, like, passed down through the family. You go out and you catch big pieces of big tunas, right? It's a business. Well, at some point, I believe it might have been during the Obama administration, where all of a sudden they said, well, wait a minute now. You've overfished. You've overfished this region. You have limits now, and you can only do X, Y, and Z and go out during, these periods in time. And so for a country that was hungry for fish and couldn't get the fish that they normally got from the East Coast. Where did that fish come from? It came from Europe. So now you had European fish coming in, and European suppliers, European companies who were supplanting the local catch. So what happened to those guys that had those boats and went out and caught those fish, and they couldn't do it anymore? They got depressed. A lot of them lost their jobs, their livelihood, their self-esteem, their self-respect, lost their homes. What happens to people when they go down that path? They look to escape. It's painful. It's painful. They do drugs. They drink. Probably fuck around. Not out of power or not out of a sense of power, but out of desperation. Would you call them sinners? Because that's how they handled their life. Because some agency decided to fuck with their livelihood so that some other corporations could take advantage of now a void in the marketplace and basically ruin their livelihoods. And because perhaps they weren't the best people, did they fall off? Did they become sinners as a result? This is what I'm talking about, right? I mean, I always find it fascinating when we get into these ideological discussions about who sins and who's fallen and how they got there and why they got there. Now, that said, there are a group of people who have chosen a path, not my path. There are a group of people who have chosen a path of self-indulgence. Now, those guys, I use the word guys because mostly, were not self-indulgent. They were hurting. They're in pain. And they didn't know how to cope with their situation. And they probably feel horrible. And they let people down. They let themselves down. And some of them may have come back. A lot of them didn't come back. But there is another group that is self-indulgent. And that, again, they're a byproduct of a socially engineered society. Because they've been rewarded for being self-indulgent, right? They've been rewarded for being victims. They've been rewarded for trying to find their uniqueness without applying any kind of real talent or applying any kind of exemplary skill. No, just look at me. I am going to present myself to you in a way that is going to be very hard to look at. And I'm going to proclaim a lifestyle that is going to be very hard for you to relate to. And I am going to be protected in those choices and by those choices. You could use something like the NCAA. The NCAA has said, well, yes, of course, men who are in the process of transitioning can participate in female sports. State governors around the country have affirmed this, right? So what we have is we have a group of people who have been enabled, and that their behavior has, again, become a byproduct of a system that has helped foster, it has helped foster a certain developmental vector in their personality. And of course, within certain group settings, they're rewarded and they are supported, right? It doesn't matter how they show up. They'll have somebody in their selective group setting who will give them a hug. And then now what? Well, now this behavior or this kind of selective group setting is instituted in our schools. And from a very young age now, children are being told that this is going to be normal behavior, that this is not just going to be normal behavior, but this is how we define what a person is. And then we have a whole system that's been set up to support that socially, psychologically, biologically, and chemically. You see where I'm going with this? Like, so how much of this has to do with the fact that we're all just a bunch of worthless fucking sinners in the United States who have fallen away from God, and that now the tribulation is coming and we're going to have to pay a price for that? Well, nowhere do they mention that there have been intervening agencies that have helped bring us to this point. One way or the other, I gave you the tragic route of people who have been displaced, no longer have any sense of purpose or meaning, value, economy. They fall off the map, they get into drugs, and they wind up ruining people's lives. And, you know, either they kill themselves, wind up homeless, or go to prison. If they're lucky, maybe they bounce back, and who knows what they do, right? That's one example. And I gave you another example. The example of being enabled, a society that enables certain behaviors, identities, points of view, and is protected within the enabling. So come at me again, right? And I'm not saying we're victims. We're not victims, but clearly this thing has been so socially engineered on so many levels that the chances are that you are going to fall off your what I would call natural divinity. You would just naturally fall off. Maybe not naturally, artificially, because of the way things have been set up. Right? It's like a game, but it's not a good game. So I have a little pushback, right? I have a little bit of a pushback, and this gets into this discussion. And I'm going to get into the presentation here. Just kind of a prelude, but this gets into this discussion around what's happening in Israel, right? And I think that we can all agree that something of biblical proportion is happening there, but perhaps it's not in the way that most Christians would like to define it. In fact, it would be, I think, contrary to most Christians, especially fundamentalist Christians or dispensationalists, to be able to talk about it in ways that would make them very uncomfortable, right? So there's things happening there. That is for sure, right? There are things that are happening there. And if you watched the show with Russ on Friday, one of the things Russ brought up is the United States basically told Iran, hey, if you're going to launch a missile at Tel Aviv, we're not going to do anything about it. That was the message. And it's a very alarming message, particularly since we know what happens when this country gives its permission to another country to do something, like what they did with Saddam Hussein, with the Kuwaitis. He paid a price for it, right? So we have a situation that's unfolding there that some people believe is biblical, and I do think it is biblical, but it's not necessarily biblical in the way that I think they think it's biblical, because this place that they hold in such high veneration as the birthplace of Jesus, right? And not only the birthplace, but the place where he died for all of our sins and was resurrected, is again the most important place on the planet. And I would beg to differ. The most important place on the planet is in your heart. That is the most important place in this realm. It is the Jerusalem in your heart, okay? And once we start thinking about it along those lines, the sooner and better we'll be able to unhook ourselves from this I don't want to use the word superstition, but it is a mythology that I don't believe serves a lot of people. And I'm not talking about the life and the death and and the crucifixion and the resurrection. I'm not talking about that. That's a separate metaphysical experience and dynamic that I believe should be set aside and hermetically sealed. What I'm talking about is the real estate. Okay, the real estate. Because if we're being completely honest, like the God of the universe cares more about what's in your heart than a speck of land. I don't care how holy you think it is, right? The God of the universe, that is what is on God's mind, not the veneration of a place. And again, I can make a case that the Stonehenge of the hill country is at the same parallel as Jerusalem. They didn't say that up the cross garden. And I'm not knocking the cross people. Their hearts are in the right place. And I do believe we are at a time of revelation. We're seeing shit that we've never seen before. What I don't know if anything comes of it, but it's coming fast and furious. It's all out there, right? So this clearly is a time of revelation. And if revelation is at hand, then again, this idea of the second coming is at hand as well. But I have a very different view of that than my friends at the cross garden. I've got a very different view of that. So I'm going to go through my presentation from Saturday, and some of you are aware of it because I've talked about some of this, and some of you are probably new to the channel, and maybe this will be helpful for you. Now, again, I want to bring this up in a way where how do I describe this? I want to frame it in a way where I am looking at the manifestation of the event in a different way than the myth makers are positing. Okay. So this is what I brought to the table on Saturday. Okay. So here we have, and I used a different eclipse map. I used the one from 2017 and 2024. And right there, I believe, is where the Arch of St. Louis is. Right there's Missouri, right? I think this is the Missouri River, and I think the Arch is like right in there, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So one of the things that I've been talking about is all the things that are ancillary to this eclipse. So let's start with CERN. Now, some people think CERN is a psyop, that it's just there to, fuck with people and give people this idea that that they have this thing that they're able to turn on and spook us. Well, linear accelerators are real. We know that they are because they exist. Maybe not like CERN, but there are plenty that exist. There's one in Dallas, which is really big. I used to drive past one all the time in Palo Alto with Stanford. Stanford had a linear accelerator that they would use. So we know linear accelerators are real. So why wouldn't CERN be real as well? We'll just, for the sake of our argument or the sake of exposition, we'll just say CERN is real. Okay. And they're going to turn CERN on during this event, during this Black Sun event. It's like, well, that sounds a little suspicious. That sounds a little possibly malevolent. Like, what kind of portals or what kind of gateways are they trying to open during this Black Sun event? It's a good question. Now, there are times when, and it's happened in the past, where they've tried to turn CERN on and something's happened. It doesn't always, I think, respond um, accordingly. But what happens if it does? Right? Let's say they're successful, or let's say that the chances of it working are greater than not. What are they trying to do? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to tap in to this celestial event? Right? Are they trying to tap the void? I don't know. I can speculate. I've got a good comic book imagination, but clearly this thing has been announced, but it's happening, right? Now, we have this Devil's Comet, which we all recently became acquainted with, and happens every 70 years. So the last time that it was here was in 1954. And one of the things that happened, which again, if you've been following what I've been talking about, is that in 1954, Bill Haley and his Comets wrote Rock Around the Clock, which is considered to be the first rock and roll song. And rock and roll is known as the devil's music, right? So with the inception of the Devil's Comet, we have a band named the Comets who make a record that a year later will be announced to the world, and it is the beginning of the devil's music, right? Now, this was on the bingo card already. So apparently we've got a cicada bloom happening, sometime this week as well. So that's kind of biblical, right? That could be kind of biblical. This is your modern add-on. And then we have the red heifer. And the red heifer is supposed to be sacrificed, I believe. I had heard the 10th, but then I've heard it could be sacrificed up until the 22nd of April. What's interesting is that red is the color of Mars. We are in the sign of Aries, right? So the red heifer kind of, meets the criterion of the color. We also are in a cycle where Jupiter is in Taurus, Uranus is in Taurus. Israel was founded as a Taurus country in 1948, which has some interesting significance in terms of Taurus and the cow, the heifer. The sacrifice is supposed to take place on Mount Olive. Mount Olive has the same gematria as Christ the King, which is kind of interesting in gematria language. So the thing with the heifer is that there is no third temple. So they are going to sacrifice this poor cow, which I'm not in favor of. Right? Even though I said practice whatever you want to practice, but I'm not in favor of animal sacrifice like that. And if you're going to eat the cow, that's different, right? If you're going to eat the cow, you're going to have some brisket, maybe a nice skirt steak. That's different, okay? But not down with the ashes of the cow mixed with water. Now, originally, I had read that the ashes of the cow would be mixed with the blood of the cow, and that the two together would then form like a minor base coat, right? A minor base coat on the temple wall. I mean, that's really what it was supposed to do. But then it got changed to water. I don't know if it got changed to water. Maybe it was always water. But I had read that blood was involved here because it is a blood sacrifice. I mean, let's be honest about this, right? And then it's the burning sacrifice. Then they're going to burn the cow, which is interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, people of the Jewish faith don't like to be cremated. They want to be buried, right? So it's interesting that the cremation thing is in place. Anyway, so that happens on Mount Olive. Now, again, because I've looked into this a little bit, supposedly when Jesus was crucified, that they're outside of the city walls of Jerusalem, there was a cow that was being sacrificed as well. So it's part of this crucifixion story, right? Like it's an ancillary part of this slaughter and sacrifice. Again, you can look it up, right? It's like not everybody agrees on it, but it's one of those stories like, well, it happened during this time because we couldn't do it, while Jesus was getting crucified, and he wasn't in that anyway. So let's go do it out here. So the two events or the two rituals kind of intersect. It's like, oh, that's interesting. It's an interesting intersection. And especially astrologically with the presence of Taurus in the sky, and of course, Israel being a Taurus country. So there's that, right? Like that's kind of piling on. Now, the slaughter of the cow, the sacrifice of the cow, is to invoke and welcome the Moshiach, who is the Messiah for the Hebrews, right? Not every Hebrew, not every Jewish person is waiting for the Moshiach. I can tell you that right now. But there is a sect of it's weird because there are all these apocalyptic sects, right? And even the end times Christians are kind of an apocalyptic sect. I'm sorry, that's just how I see it, right? And so they have their own version. So the Mashiach, this paves the way for the return of the Moshiach, who is the Messiah of the Hebrew people, which has nothing to do with the second coming of Christ. They're two different things. And yet, the dispensationalists and the modern day fundamentalist Christians do believe that there needs to be a temple in place for Jesus to return. So this is all intertwined and entangled. Like there's this entanglement with this thing that's kind of mind-blowing, okay? It's mind-blowing. Well, Jesus is already there, right? He's already in your heart. Like he theoretically died for your sins. His vibration is an emanation which is embedded in every single organic and inorganic thing on this planet. Do we have to go through this again, over and over again? I'm just, I'm thinking out loud here. Because I think it takes us down a very dark path. And that's not to say that the second coming isn't at hand. I believe it is. But it's not in the way that these people are portraying it. Now, here we go. So NASA is going to fire these 3 rockets up into the dark sun. The rockets are named Apep or Apophis, which is the world serpent, which comes out to consume the sun. So we have these artificial events that are taking place, and these are just a few. We've got this, the Eclipse rocket campaign. We've got this. What happened last Easter Sunday? They changed the name of the day. Didn't they? They changed the name of the day. They hijacked the day. It was Transvisibility Day. Why is all this happening now? Is it because they just want to fuck with people? Or are they trying to redirect, sidetrack, and avert something else that's coming? That's the question. Because it seems like they're going out of their way to throw all these obstacles in the path, right? All of them. And when I see that, my spidey senses go, something's happening here. Something is happening that we don't completely understand, because they're going out of their way to hijack this time, literally this time. We go, where are we? We're in the season of resurrection, right? For the Jewish people, we're in Passover. We just came through Easter Sunday. It is the season of resurrection. We're having a freaking eclipse during the season of resurrection. It's significant. It is not insignificant. And tomorrow may go, and may come and go, and nothing may happen. Not a thing may happen tomorrow. But I just want to bring your attention back to 2017 and the eclipse in 2017 that literally cut the country in two, almost along Mason-Dixon line. And we were a house divided after 2017. House divided. Now, if you were to put the eclipse from October in here, it would come here, right up here, and then it would come down here, and it would go through here to here, right? And that would turn this into an Aleph, which is in Hebrew, Aleph is the first letter, and it represents the head of an ox that is caught in a fence, right? So even here we have very interesting symbolism with the other eclipse as it relates to Taurus, the bull, Jupiter in Taurus, Uranus in Taurus, and of course the red heifer, which they got from Texas. 5 of them. And they arrived in Israel on the 22nd of September in 2022. So they've been there since then. And they have to be at least 3 years old. And not a single blemish on their nice red coat. All right. So we have these weird, feels like symbolic, supernatural, technological add-ons to this thing that's happening at a particular time. Of course, we have the Nineveh path, 7 cities named Nineveh, 7, of course, being a very sacred number. And then Nineveh being a town in the Old Testament. And then we have this. And to me, this is one of the most interesting components to all of this, which I've talked about before. So you have Ben Shapiro, right, from the Daily Wire, Candace Owens, and Michael Knowles. So everybody knows what's been going on here, although not everybody does. There are people at the event on Saturday that didn't. That's okay. They don't need to. Candace was ultimately expelled from the Daily Wire because she used a phrase that was not so kosher with Ben Shapiro. And the phrase was Christ is King. And that phrase, along with liking a Nick Fuentes tweet, got her kicked out of the Daily Wire. Now, Ben Shapiro, now I am going to posit that what we are witnessing is a passion play, and that Ben Shapiro plays the role of the Sanhedrin, and he's perfectly suited for the role because Ben Shapiro is a lawyer, he's a law degree, and that's what the Sanhedrin did, right? They were the interpreters of Talmudic, and I'm not sure. I think Talmud came later, but they were the interpreters of rabbinical law, right? That's what the Sanhedrin did. So Ben is like the Sanhedrin, and then Candace is the person who gets crucified for her belief. And Michael Knowles, who was Candace's very close friend, best friend to her husband, and godfather of their daughter, came out and had a segment on the Daily Wire and basically said, well, Candace is my friend, and Ben's my friend. In fact, Ben was my lawyer, and Jeremy's my friend. They're all my friends. Sometimes friends get into squabbles, and I'm going to stay out of it. I get it. I understand where he's coming from, but I think the stakes are incredibly high. Some of you may disagree with me because I'm a little old school here. But what if Michael Knowles came out and said, as much as I love the Daily Wire, as much as I love my job here, and as much as I have enjoyed working with Ben and Jeremy and everybody else, I cannot abide by this decision. As somebody who is an adherent of free speech and truth, I don't think Candace did anything wrong. And in fact, I stand by Candace. And if that's going to cost me my position at the Daily Wire, so be it. I just want Candace, we haven't talked, but I want to let you know that I support you, and I hope you land on your feet and continue your journey as a broadcaster, podcaster, journalist, Christian. And I hope and pray that someday you and Ben may be able to mend fences, and we can come to a peaceful accord around what happened. But I support you, Candace. That's all he needed to do. He didn't need to quit. He didn't need to stomp his feet and say, Candace, because of you, girl, I'm out of here. He didn't do it. He didn't do it. So Candace then stopped following him on social media. So in this regard, Michael Knowles plays a bit of a Judas, right? Like theoretically, he's choosing the 40 pieces of silver to stay employed versus cross his boss and take Candace aside. And some people will say, well, I do the same thing. All he had to do is say, hey, look, I support her. I support her version of her truth. And I support her ability to speak it. And I'm sorry it didn't work out here. But I support it. And that's all he had to do. Candace, I support you. And the only thing that I have to now consider is what I can say here. And maybe I have to revisit that. I don't know. I'm sure I'll have to sit down with Ben and Jeremy at some point, and we'll go over the talking points. But, I support you, Candace. And, it's all he had to do. He didn't, and he took the weak middle. So what we have, right, is we have a playing out of a biblical story, right? Judgment. And I would say, well, the judgment is you're done, kaput, you're out of here. And then basically Michael's saying, yeah, I'll take the money. It's not worth me being uncomfortable and having to support my friend. Sound familiar? Now, Candace is an interesting name. because when I looked up the origination of Candace, it actually happens to refer to an Ethiopian queen who decides that she wants to follow the ways of Jesus. Oh, that's kind of interesting. And Candace is actually married to somebody who is, has peerage, as they say in England, right? Like he is a part of the English aristocracy, which means he's part of the bloodline. Now, I read somewhere that maybe the guy's father might have bought his title. I don't know, but it doesn't really matter because in that role, Candace does kind of occupy the space of being a queen because she's married to somebody that has OBE after their name, right? So again, just from this kind of what I would call an astro symbolic perspective, we are in the midst of something. And we are in the midst of something I think really big. And that's not to take away from, what my fellow Curvillians are doing up on the hill, or what my fellow Curvillians are doing down by the river with Stonehenge. But something big is in the air. And one of the things that I've talked about here is, and again, when you begin to approach this, like the enormity of it is really significant. It's really, really significant. And so I took this is where I took people, and I just used this image of the Shroud of Turin because I don't know. I've always felt like the Shroud of Turin was really compelling, and I've heard like, oh, that's Da Vinci. He was fucking with people. Whatever. I just think it's a compelling image. So I use this image, and it's like, okay, well, here we go, right? Like this is I think what's up. I think these are the stakes, right? Is the return of the cosmic Christ, and that is a pretty big energy. That's a pretty big energy. That's an energy that permeates all of us, right? And it's not attached to real estate. I'm sorry, it's not attached to real estate. I'm not sorry. And is it going to happen tomorrow? Is it going to happen next week, next month, next year? I don't know. I don't know the timeline. But I just look around and I see what's happening, right? I'm seeing these things getting played out. I'm seeing all of these, what I would call diversions, points of interception. It seems like they're going out of their way to disrupt something. And we always think that the thing that they're that could happen to us would be quote unquote bad, right? Like, oh well, maybe it's going to be an ELE, an extinction level event, and all these elites know that that it's coming, and that they've got their underground communities, bunkers, etc. Right? Or maybe it's going to be this EMP or whatever. Right? We all think that it is going to be something that's like a black swan event or catastrophic. What if it's a black swan event and catastrophic for some people, but not everybody? That's where my mind is at, right? And it's like, oh, well, you're going to manufacture that, or you're going to engineer that, or that's part of your belief system, but maybe that's not really what's happening. And maybe for you, it is the end of your world. But for other people, it might be the beginning of something else. And again, I'm just going on sort of the jet stream of what all these things are pointing towards. That's what it feels like to me. Could they fire a blue beam? Could they do a whole kind of second coming event? Sure, they can do all that. I'm sure they can do a lot of things. But it just feels like there's something very imminent with this eclipse. And again, because it's in Aries and we're dealing with all these Aries components, and the season of the resurrection happens in Aries. It's about being reborn, right? That's what it's all about. And we have almost a full solar maximum in Aries with the eclipse. Not only that, but we have Saturn and Mars in conjunction in Pisces, which in a lot of ways is kind of the, how would I describe it? I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go with Saturn and Mars and Pisces. Um, but I would say that the most positive interpretation of Saturn and Mars and Pisces is that people take responsibility and accountability for their actions at every single level. But because theoretically, that's what a conscious being would do, right? This is what a conscious being would do. Would they would be conscious and aware of every single action, and that they would understand that their actions have consequences. And along with that, I think that there's this really interesting dialogue around power with a Mars Saturn conjunction in Pisces, and being able to um, be gateways for that kind of power. And I think that there are people who have lived amongst us that understand this. Like Padre Pio is probably one of those people, right? He could biolocate, he could heal the sick. This guy was possessed of some very interesting gifts. And I think that that's really what we're just beginning to hint at here. And we have been stepped on and stepped down as a species for a very long time, as a family for a very long time. And maybe it's about time for that to change. And I don't think we can vote our way out of this. I don't think it's possible. I think the system itself is too polluted, too corrupted. Um, when I was a kid, we used to have a pool, and if we let it go too long, you get all this algae in the pool, and you would have to do this shock treatment for the pool, which it was okay. I mean, it wasn't the best for uh, like the pool and the pump and all the things that goes along with it. Like kind of hard on the pump, right? Because you're using an intense amount of chlorine in order to kill the algae, right? And that's kind of what it would take. We'd have to have this shock treatment to the system in order to, clear out, for lack of a better term, all the algae that's accumulated. Because I don't, what I mean, let's just play this out here. I mean, let's say Trump gets elected and he makes good on his promise and he starts shipping people back. Do you know what that's going to do to this country? Do you know how people are going to respond? They're going to lose their fucking minds. They're going to lose their minds if that happens. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't go back home. They're here theoretically, illegally. That's a whole other conversation, right? But it's like that's how far down the line we are now. That attempts to eradicate what's happened will have serious unintended consequences. And I'm not saying that it couldn't be done or shouldn't be done. I'm just saying that we're at this point now where that just sends a whole other domino effect into play. And it feels like the only agency that is going to uh, get us through and out of the time we're in is something like this. And I know a lot of Christians sit around and pray, and they're hoping for the rapture and everything. This is just the conclusion I've come to. This is the conclusion I've come to. And as we look at the eclipse and everything that's associated with it, and particularly the sign of Aries in the time of year, at Easter, at Passover, the season of resurrection, this is a very significant eclipse and a very significant time. Now, there may be things that will happen tomorrow that may be not in our best interest. Could happen, right? There may be things tomorrow that don't appear to happen at all immediately, but then something does happen later, because usually that's what happens with eclipses. But that aside, right? That aside, this is one of the things that I wish I had added to the presentation yesterday, was that if this moment, or when this moment comes, because I do think it's coming, when this moment comes, and I don't think it's going to be a guy on horseback with a crown and a sword like they have at the sculpture garden. You need to be ready for it, right? It's like that's the other part of this. That's the other part of this. When I was a kid, I surfed a little bit, and all you surfers out there know that in order to catch the wave, you need some momentum. You need to be going almost as fast as the wave is in order to catch the wave and ride the wave. If you're not, what's going to happen? You're going to miss the wave, right? It's a really simple metaphor. Really, really simple metaphor. So if you want to catch this wave, you need some momentum in your life. So you need to be able to approximate the vibration. You need to start paddling. That's what I'm saying. You need to start paddling to catch the wave. And this is just me. And again, I'm a very imperfect person, but I am always going through my brain. How am I showing up? How am I treating another person? Right? It doesn't mean that I need to kiss anybody's ass, or it doesn't mean I need to be supercilious and try to garner favor from others. Quite the contrary. But that's always in the back of my brain. How am I showing up? How am I interacting with this person? Am I conscious? Am I aware? Am I thoughtful? Am I meeting this person in a state of positivity and peace and love? If they show me otherwise, that's a whole different discussion. And so these are just minor things, right? This is how I've been trained my brain to paddle, right? To paddle and to catch the wave. This is my practice. And you may have a completely different practice. Your practice may be to meditate. Your practice may be to walk in the woods, put your feet on the ground, commune with the solar logos, right? Whatever your practice is, right? The whole idea is to catch the wave. Because when the wave comes, you want to catch the wave. Because there are people who are paddling around out there who don't even know the wave is coming. And they'll miss the wave. And I don't know if there's gonna be another wave. Maybe. I'm not the keeper of all secrets. So it's a good practice anyway, right? It sets up good relationship and good relating with others. And good things come out of that when that happens. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice truth. And sometimes it's even harder, right? When you have an approach to life where your main goal with another person is to meet them. I guess the Buddhists would call it namaste, right? The spirit of God within me meets and greets and recognizes the spirit of God within you. But when you do that and you attempt to live your life along those lines, then it becomes, in some ways, even more challenging to speak truth, because now you're speaking truth from a place of thoughtfulness and not just sort of, a shotgun blast of here it comes, right? So it's a really interesting exercise, and I wish I had added that to the talk yesterday, but that's really the add-on, right? You want to catch the wave, and to catch the wave, you have to approximate the vibration, and you approximate the vibration by living and being the emanation of the vibration of the consciousness. That's how it works. That's how it works. So if you get anything out of tonight, that would be the thing that I would say take with you, because I think we are in important times. And people may say, see, nothing happened. I don't believe that. As sure enough, as we all sat around in 2017 and thought, well, that was nice, we had no idea that by the time 2020 rolled around, there would be riots and fires burning in the streets of America. There would be statues that be toppled, that we would be forced to stay in our homes by some global agency, that our lives and our livelihood will be threatened and ruined, that our own families will be split like atoms. When that eclipse happened, none of us really thought along those lines. But look what happened. 3 years later, the country was split in two. It was atomized. It's exactly what happened. So now we have the country being split into four quarters. Four quarters. Somebody was talking about four corners and how four corners would be an important place to be in this eclipse. So some of you people out there in four corners territory, I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's one of those areas that might be interesting to be during this time. So if you're in the four corners area, maybe you want to take a little drive out there, see who else is out there ready to meet you. All right, let's do a quick search through the news and the upcoming events here, with like what's going on. Let's do a quickie. We'll get up to date, and then we'll open the lines. And if you guys want to chime in, okay, what do we have here? Let's see. Oh, this is an incoming object, supposed to hit Madagascar, off the coast. I don't know if you guys have heard that. Okay, what else? All right. U.S. approves 65 F-16 fighter jets for Ukraine. That is on the night of the eclipse. Let's see what else. Oh, this is interesting. This is from Gateway Pundit. 64-year-old man who operates Trump RV, beaten with sledgehammer, airlifted to hospital with serious head injuries. Well, that's very Aries-like, isn't it? It's terrible. Rocky Granada of Edison, beloved father and grandfather, was well known in the region across the nation for his Trump RV. Michael Gonzalez, 36 of Philadelphia, was charged with attempted murder. Let's see. The victim suffered significant injuries to his head. Of course, that's Aries. Was taken by helicopter to Jersey Shore University Medical Center in Neptune. So he's been taken to Neptune, which I guess if you're going to visit a hospital, Neptune would be the place to be, since 12th house rules hospitals. All right, what else do we have? What other eclipse news do we have? It's terrible. We had a Southwest Boeing Airlines 737 with the engine cover that shred off the plane as it departed Denver. So that's an interesting little event there. Let's see. Trump has gone on record that he is Jesus being persecuted. Let's see. What else do we have here? Let's see. We had the barge that nearly hit the Verrazano Bridge. We also had another bridge in Oklahoma. Here we go. Here's another one. This is from Charisma News. What happened the last time two eclipses formed a giant X over the New Madrid fault zone, which we talked about before. On April 8th, the Great American Eclipse of 2024 will complete the giant X over America. The Great American Eclipse of 2017 started. We'll be racing through our solar system for the first time in 71 years. We talked about. Most of you already know all of this, but what is not widely known is that we have seen the same pattern before. In 1811, a solar eclipse finished a giant X over the heartland of America. That a solar eclipse that started in 1806. Meanwhile, Tecumseh's comet was making headlines all over the nation as it raced through the heavens. Approximately 3 months after the giant X over America was completed, a cataclysmic earthquake happened along the New Madrid fault line. Well, we've talked about the New Madrid for a while here. And we've been talking about the New Madrid ever since this eclipse really got our attention, right? On June 16th, 1806, a total solar eclipse crossed the North America from Baja California to Massachusetts. This was a long duration eclipse of nearly 5 minutes totality at the point of the greatest eclipse. While the western United States was sparsely populated, the eclipse did pass over Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. This was the first half of the giant X over America in the early 1800s. This is when America was going through the second Great Awakening, by the way. The second half was formed by the path of the Ring of Fire solar eclipse that took place on September 17th, 1811. The eclipse is so widely anticipated, even Thomas Jefferson wrote about it. But in 1811, when the solar eclipse occurred on Constitution Day, was visible in central Virginia, that is exactly what Thomas Jefferson did. On September 17th, he diligently recorded his observations in his weather journal. He noted the times when the moon first contacted the sun, when the annulus ring shape formed, when the annulus broke, and when the contact ended. He also indicated the central time of the contact and the central time of the annulus. According to Jefferson's observations, the entire event lasted 3 hours, 15 minutes, and 34 seconds. The paths of those two eclipses intersected in the vicinity of Cleveland, Ohio. The 1806 and 1811 eclipses cross in Cleveland, which was founded in 1796. It is not a Hepton cross. and one of the eclipses is annular, but it's still probably the most pronounced U.S. cross and solar occurrence. So now we have 2 total eclipses. And I guess the Heston cross is a little bit different. So this is about as close as it got. Approximately 3 months after the eclipse of 1811 completed the giant X over America, the New Madrid fault zone started to go absolutely nuts. To this day, we have never seen earthquakes of such destructive power in the continental United States. The New Madrid earthquakes were the biggest earthquakes in American history. They recorded here. I'll show you where I'm reading from. I'll put a link in the chat if you guys want to read this. I'll put it in right here. There you go. So that's where I'm reading from. Then I'll share the page here. New Madrid earthquakes are the biggest earthquakes in American history. They occurred in the central Mississippi Valley, but were felt as far away as New York City, Boston, Montreal, Washington, D.C. President James Madison and his wife Dolly felt them in the White House. Church bells rang in Boston from December 16th, 1811 through March of 1812. There were over 2,000 earthquakes in the central Midwest and between 6,000 and 10,000 earthquakes in the Boot Heel of Missouri, where New Madrid is located near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. It's kind of near where the 2017 24 eclipses are intersecting. That's interesting. 3 of the earthquakes are on the list of America's top earthquakes. Now, I don't know how they measured them. They didn't have the Richter scale in 1811. Magnitude of 8.1. How did they figure that out? I don't understand how they figured it out. So 8.1, December 16th, 1811. 7.8 on January 23rd, 1812. And then on February 7th in 1812, 8.8. Again, I don't know how they determined that, since I'm not sure they had the Richter scale devices at that time. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. So this is the area. They caused bank failures along the Mississippi River, landslides along Chickasaw Bluffs in Kentucky and Tennessee, and uplift and subsidence of large tracts of land in the Mississippi River floodplain. One such uplift related to faulting near New Madrid, Missouri, temporarily forced the Mississippi River to flow backwards. In addition, the earthquake liquefied subsurface sediment over a large area. So this is a pretty big event. I think this is kind of a born-again site, breaking news, spiritual perspectives. But, we have precedent here, right? We have precedent. 1811. And the New Madrid is an area that we've been talking about here for quite a while, ever since this earthquake, popped into our awareness. So very interesting. And then they had the comet, but a different comet. Signs. The heavens are filled with signs, aren't they? All right, what else do we have here? Let's see. So I'm just looking at current events, things that are happening like right now. I'm just trying to catch up with anomalies as we head towards this guy with the sledgehammer sucks, man. And it's interesting that he was taken to Neptune Hospital right? Neptune rules Pisces. Rules Pisces. And those are two very prominent signs in the sky right now. Neptune, Saturn, Mars, and Pisces, Aries, wounding, injury to the head. Interesting. Okay, so I'm about to put a link in chat. So if you guys want to jump in and you feel like you want to talk, you want to share uh, any insights, anything you want, we'll throw that out there. Before I do, I talked about this thing that happened to me on Friday. Was it Friday? Yeah, it was Friday. So I was at, and some of you who were watching the show with Russ and I may have heard the story. If you haven't, I'm going to share it with you. It's actually a funny story, but it's also an interesting story. I was in line at HEB because I had some water bottles that I wanted to fill, and one of which I had just purchased. So they were 3 5-gallon water bottles, basic stuff, right? And at HEB, every grocery store has the customer service in the front. You can buy stamps, lottery tickets. Sometimes you can pay your electrical bill. Sometimes, depending on the store, you can do a MoneyGram, Telegram transfer of money. Right, you know what I'm talking about, right? So I just wanted to get change. So there's this woman who's in line with me, and she's I think she's like my age, and she's not from another country. She's Texan, and she said, "What are those?" I said, "These." I said, "These are water bottles. What do you do with them?" I said, "Well, you fill them up, and then you use the water in them." She said, "Really? I have never seen those before." And I'm like, "You gotta be kidding." I'm in my head, like, "You gotta be kidding me. You've never seen these things before?" So you've never seen a 5-gallon water bottle before? She said, "No." How do you get the water out of it? Do you hook it up to your faucet? And I'm like, "No, well, there's this thing. It's like an urn. And you take the bottle and you tip it over and you pour it in the urn. And then you dispense the water." She said, "Well, I'll pee. I just have a pitcher at home. And I just fill it up." I said, "Well, it's not bad if you have a good filter." But I was trying to be, I don't want to say, "You got to be kidding me. Like, where have you been for the last 60 years?" Again, I'm trying, I'm trying to be that guy, right? And be that guy. I said, "Well, if you have a good filter, it probably works for you." And I just thought to myself, I thought I'd seen it all. This person never seen a freaking 5-gallon water jug. How many times have they gone through a grocery store where they sell them, or been to a person's house, or been to a business that has them and has a little water cooler and those little conical paper cups, not even the conical ones, the little Dixie cups you fill up, right? Like, at not one point in her life did she ever notice any of those things. I thought, this is bizarre. So then I began to think about it. It's like, why am I talking about this with her? And oh, well, this is perfect. This is Aquarius, right? This was the symbol of the water bearer, in turning the contents of the filled container, right, into the cistern. And it's like, when you look at Aquarius, it's not a cistern, although I think there are some symbols of that, but it's mostly pouring the contents of the heavens onto either land or onto another body of water. And I thought to myself, This is an Aquarian symbol, right? We're talking about this in a very kind of um, synchromistic sort of way. And it's like somebody sort of being awakened to this thing that they had never seen before or understood. And she wouldn't have that kind of, I think, symbolic understanding of it, but I did. I was like, oh, we're in Aquarius now, right? We are in Aquarius now. And this comes back to what I started off with. And again, I know that it's different with a pitcher. The concept of a pitcher and a water jug are similar, but their application and distribution are not. Right. So with a pitcher, you're taking the water and you're filling the pitcher. Maybe you fill it up 3/4 of the way, and then you pour a little bit out. It goes through a filter, but you're not pouring the whole thing out, which is theoretically what I am doing with the 5-gallon jug. I'm pouring the entire contents of the jug out. It just so happens that there is a cistern there to receive it, right? I am not doling out a little bit of water at a time from the 5-gallon jug into the cistern, which is the methodology of the pitcher. They're different. They're different systems of delivery. So I thought that the pitcher, to me, is representative of Pisces, right? It's a container. It holds the water. We're able to share the water. Right? You get a little water ritual. Would you like a glass of water? I'll have some water. We'll have some water. Here, cheers. Here's some water. Right? It's very Piscean in a lot of ways. But the 5-gallon jug is Aquarian because you're dumping the entirety of the contents into that thing where it is contained. And I thought, this is it. This is my own personal kind of revelation that we are now moving into this time, right? We are now moving into the time where all the contents are being distributed. And I've always felt that this whole idea of the second coming was an Aquarian event, and that everybody who was ready to catch the wave would be a part of it. And it wouldn't be localized. Oh, here's one man again. Here's one man again, and he's going to come and he is going to eliminate the dreck and the dregs from this world. And last time he was on a mission of peace, and this time he's on a mission of retribution. I never really felt that. Who knows? Maybe it's true. But I always felt like it was more like, okay, it was one man then. It's many now. It's many. And that's always been the symbolism of the event, or the symbolism of the wave. We'll use the wave analogy again. And I thought, man, I'm glad I ran into that woman at HEB who asked me, in some ways, the most ridiculous question I'd ever heard. But after I spent time with her question and examined the symbols inside the question, I was like, thanks for asking the question, because it really was a very timely question for me to understand another piece now. All right, let me do this. Let me have a little link. What am I doing here? All right, copy that. So we have about 20, let's go 21 minutes. Let's say an hour left, half hour left. I got a link in there. And if you want to come in and you want to share an eclipse story, an eclipse epiphany, eclipse revelation, there you go. We'll take a few calls. I guess they're like video calls, right? Should I put the Jeopardy music on? No, it's just, Paul, it was just a protein bar. Nothing more. Okay. Oh, Peter.
Oh, hi there. Can you hear me?
Hello, Peter. Yes, loud and clear.
Hi. Oh, wow. I'm in Scotland. So I'm just heading to work, and yes.
Where in Scotland are you?
I am probably about 20 miles from Edinburgh.
Okay.
Like roughly between Edinburgh and Glasgow. Okay. So,
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. So basically, with the whole Christ thing, I had an experience as a child. Basically, my father, we were in Eastern Europe. I'm Hungarian. So during the communist era, my father was an exorcist in Eastern Europe, and he was quite famous. Not famous like you are now, but like underground.
Well, that sounds interesting. Oh, I think we lost Peter. Peter, come back. That was just getting good.
I'm here.
Yeah. Keep going, man. This is interesting.
So, and he was, basically he was choked by the system in a way. So we lost all our, social benefits, everything. We, all our letters came open. But he was probably the most powerful poor man I have ever seen, ever. And I'm 43 now. So, so with the Christ thing, so I had a small, like a view into the Christ consciousness, or the power of Christ, I suppose. And I've never seen it ever since. After my father's death, my mother kept taking us to
church. Oh, don't go away. This is getting good. Come on back, Peter. He must hit it. He must have hit a flat spot. But it sounded to me.
No.
Oh, there you are. Okay, keep going.
Right. So and it kept bugging me throughout my life that all throughout Christianity and Christian history, like Christ said that you can do what I can do and more.
Yes.
And if we did everything correctly, then that's what should have happened in the span of 2,000 years in Christian history, and we don't see that. And I suppose that we are doing something wrong, and you can hear about the apostles, they're doing miracles and performing acts of extraordinary acts and stuff like that. And then as soon as the Bible gets put together by the Romans, it's all gone.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. There's something that's definitely lost in translation, right? And and I don't know what your experience was, but when somebody does have what I would call a transcendental or a religious experience or something that they can't necessarily define, but they know that it is related to Christ or what we're talking about, like there's something clearly different about that experience. And not that I'm a super religious person, but one time I actually had Jesus come to me in my bedroom and talk to me. And again, I don't go to church. This is a long time ago in my 20s. But when you have something like that and it impacts your life, like you remember it. And I think to your point, we fell away from the fundamental teaching and the understanding that we are portals of that consciousness. And through, I would say, enculturation and the application of dark magic onto our world, we've lost our way a bit, and it's becoming, I think, more and more visible to people just how far we've kind of gone off that path. And I don't know if there is a quote unquote biblical roadmap to get us back, because I don't really relate to a lot of the sort of biblical people that I meet here. But I do believe that there is a cosmic roadmap for us, that it's already inside of us, and that what we have to do is connect with it. And how do we connect with it? We connect with it through awareness, and we connect with it through practice and intention and recognition. And I think if we have those things, then we begin to set the field for it to occur. And it comes back to this idea of surfing and catching the wave. And you want to be able to catch the wave when it comes. And I think that there are simple techniques to catch the wave. So that's my feeling about it. And then, yeah, we fell off, and a lot of it was lost in translation. And I don't know where you are now, besides being in Scotland on the way to work, but how do you feel about the world and your place in it and where we're going? I think we're on a bit of a time delay with Peter, since he's been able to answer questions with the time delay.
Can you hear me?
I'd like to know. Yeah, now I can. Yeah, did you hear what I said?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So I think the situation is really grim for humanity, but I think I would call myself a paranoid optimist at this point, where I have all my senses are pinging, and I sense the danger. But we have a really good expression in Hungarian. And if I translate it word to word, it's called the soul presence. Is where you understand the danger, but it's not fear. It's you're present, and you know that you will come through. You see, you understand what I mean?
Completely.
So that's. But anyway, I'm gonna be late for work. Robert, you're an absolute hero. I've been a long time follower. and thank you very much for everything you do. You helped me out so many times throughout this, past, I don't know, 8 years that I've been listening to your content. Um, I can't even describe with words, and it's not the lack of English. Uh, the uh, the wisdom and the value of the work that you do for all of us.
Well, Peter, thank you so much, and you have a great day in Scotland. And appreciate your words and appreciate you. And you take care. Okay.
You too. All right, sir. Thank you.
Bye.
You have a good one.
All righty.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Speaking of grim, being grim times.
What's going on? Can you hear me?
What's happening, Evan Nathaniel Graham? How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Good. How are you?
Good. I'm great.
Yeah. So yeah, first of all, I love all your Sunday shows. They're elite, I guess is the word I would use. So it's a pleasure to be here. I don't know. I was just thinking about how the eclipse is a couple degrees off, but it's like squaring that, Saturn Pluto conjunction from back in 2020 a little bit. And I've just been reflecting on how that cycle we're in of Saturn and Pluto is like so, judgmental. And it's like we're all sort of caught in that trap sometimes of like, judging others or ranking ourselves or thinking about status and like what status do we have through the lens of like anything. Our school that we went to, the job we have, and so on. And the Chiron and Aries placement for me is just like, don't worry about other people. It's like just find your own center,
Yeah.
like not letting society define us and just like defining ourselves.
Aren't we kind of
And
past that though? I mean, seriously, we look at what like status looks like now, and it just looks like a cheap fucking suit, right?
yeah,
Like, I don't know what investment there is in any of that anymore.
yeah,
And I think people are coming around to not really caring about having a Balenciaga, whatever the fuck, in their life, right?
yeah,
And I think we're getting to a point where a lot of people are more concerned about survival than they are about brand.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, I think you bring up something interesting. Coming back to the Saturn Pluto conjunction in 2020, and kind of being in a bit of a tight square with that Saturn Pluto conjunction triggered what happened next with COVID, right? So, do you think, because you've been doing this now for a little bit, do you think that there is going to be just a natural backlash against what's happened since 2020 as a result of the square and some of this Aries energy? Because it does feel to me, I don't know about you, but it feels to me like a lot of people are starting to smell the coffee around some of the collateral damage that's taken place to people's bodies since 2020. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. No, I think that's definitely part of it. Like, Capricorn being the system, Aries being the individual. It's like, look at where, assimilation into the culture has gotten us. Look where following orders has gotten us. It's like you're saying, it's had a deleterious effect. And I think that with Aries, it's like, yeah, like maybe I can take charge of my own health. And I think about Aries so much as like strength, like, strengthening the body physically, but also like thinking about how, there's always that like one wound that we like ignore, like for me, it was definitely as a Cancer rising with my family right now. It's like there's stuff with like family, just because I'm a couple thousand miles away, I'm like, I'm good. Like I don't have to work on that or think about that. But then I'm like, oh, how does like my relationship to my family affect my sense of like self or my ability to have other types of relationships? And so I feel like with Chiron, it's like holistically we're looking at ourselves. Like, if we're like holding something back, we're letting a wound from like our childhood or whatever, like just fester, like even that can have health effects. And so I don't know. I'm hoping that like other approaches to healing like go mainstream right now. Like I'm hearing about like more people, looking into becoming like doulas or, Reiki healers, and like people talking to me about, yeah, I have this corporate job that I hate, but like secretly I'm really like good at tarot or astrology or Reiki. And I think that maybe that will be part of the awakening is like, yeah, the mental health, the spiritual health, the physical health, like you're never going to solve it just by, getting, like getting the cards, so to speak.
Yeah, I think we just came, and I know it's kind of a hermetically sealed environment, but we came out of a symposium yesterday where everybody at the symposium was that, right? Like you could, and I experienced this. I mean, well, you were at my event,
Yeah.
yeah. So, uh, I could go through the room and pick anybody in that room and ask them to come up and speak or share some level of expertise or some technique of healing, and it wouldn't be a stretch that anybody in that room could do it, right? So I think what you're talking about has already been in the works for a while, and I think what you're bringing to the table is that it's becoming more present to people's awareness that they don't have to play the other game, but if they're going to play this other game, that they're going to have to get into it and understand it and really cultivate it. Is that getting close to what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the extra step though is like with Aries being entrepreneurship, like, and
Right.
even like the Mars Saturn conjunction being a little bit to me about like pushing back against, traditional systems. I could see a lot of people like just actually scaling up their own, just starting their own business, like just like actually trusting themselves to say like define themselves that way, like I am a
Yep.
psychic or whatever someone wants to say. And I talk to people sometimes like where they already have the skills and they can perform and they know they can perform, but we haven't like normalized it yet, like for in certain pockets of society, right? Like we haven't like normalized enlightenment, which is such a weird like concept, but it's like I don't know, a lot of people think it's like a psychosis when you're actually enlightening yourself, especially like a lot of I mean, a lot of men, right? Like in the comments, sometimes like when I make astrology videos, they think like, oh, an eclipse is just a shadow. Like, what are you talking about? Like, how could that like affect you energetically, emotionally? And I'm like, again, you have to like go inside a little bit and like think about how everything is connected. I don't know. So I think there's many layers to it, but I think that the Aries energy really could bring healers, like a new era of healers in.
Well, we can all use it. That's for sure. So you doing good?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Like I said, I just got back from a trip where I was like visiting family, and it was like my girlfriend came with me, and she was sort of giving me this outside perspective because she met my family for the first time, and she was like just pointing out some stuff that were like blind spots to me, where it's like, oh, I think that I have a good relationship, or I think I have even like a neutral relationship with someone, but it's like, oh no, this could be better. Like you could really like nurture that. So
Okay.
that's been a huge healing moment for me the last week. But otherwise, I'm still surviving somehow in LA.
Well, I'm
Even
sure
though,
I hear every now and then through the grapevine that you're doing great. So
yeah,
yeah, well, keep up the
well,
great work, and it's great to see you evolve and grow and move into this space with your own unique touch and flourish. And really proud of what you're doing. So keep on doing it, man.
well, thank you. I mean, you're the inspiration. I remember when you did my first reading, you just called out so many things that, and there were some synchronicities in those readings that tied back to some stuff I'd written in my journal. So your daily show I watch every day too. It's yeah, you're the OG in my book. So always look
Well,
up to you.
I am absolutely proud to be in the same line of work and art as you, and wish you nothing but the best and continued excellence. Okay.
Likewise, man. We'll catch up soon.
All right. Take care, Evan. See
All
you.
right. Yep. See ya.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That was great. What a great drop in. So I started with Evan as a client, and then he would come back and he would get these readings, right? And then every time he'd come back, he would know a bit more and a bit more, and we'd have these really evolved discussions around astrology in his chart. And he just took off like a rocket, and it's great, to see something like that, and especially because he's a dude, right? And he is, it's great to see men, be in this work, and to be in this work in a way where they're still men, right? And so I applaud Evan's effort and just am thrilled for his success. All right, we got Xnard Prime. Is Xnard Prime in? You got to Xnard Prime. You got to connect to the stream if you want to come in. Just let you know. All right. Well, Xnard Prime is hooking up. We can take one more. Let's take one more call, click, connection, and then we'll call it a night. Unless Xnard Prime connects his device. Okay. All right. Why don't we bring this barge safely into the dock without ramming into a fucking bridge and causing another disturbance in the supply chain. I think I'm going to stream tomorrow. I haven't figured out what the plan is, to be honest with you. I'm probably going to wake up and just feel into it. I think that's how it's going to go. But if you are subscribed, just look for a notification. And we'll go from there. Here we are. The moment we've all been waiting for. The Great Eclipse. May the force be with you. All right, Chatari, you're the best. Thank you. Mods, you're the best. Remember, if you'd like to schedule a reading with me, you can do that. And don't forget our friend Chris at True Hemp Science, who has the best CBD products that you can get for your body and your mind and your spirit. All you got to do is type in 15MINS, 15MINS, and you will get a free goodie bag when you spend $100 or more with your order from True Hemp Science. That's truehempscience.com. 15MINS is your code. And $150 or more get you free shipping. And there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. All right, everybody. Love you all. Chatari, you're the best. Take care. We'll see you on the other side of the sun. Bye for now.